The air in the courtroom was thick enough to choke on, smelling of old paper, floor polish, and a tension so palpable it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Across from me, my sister, Chloe, sat beside her sharp-suited lawyer, dabbing at her eyes with a pristine white tissue. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, sat in the pew directly behind her, their faces a carefully composed mask of righteous sorrow. It was a perfect, sickening family portrait of grief, and all of it was aimed directly at me. He preyed on her vulnerability. Chloe's lawyer, Mr. Davies, boomed, his voice artificially deep, echoing off the imposing wood-paneled walls. He systematically isolated her children, turned them against their own loving mother, and took control of the family's significant assets, including the very home built by our client's own parents. He was talking about my home, the home where I had patched up thousands of scraped knees, read bedtime stories until my voice was hoarse, and cooked more spaghetti dinners than I could possibly count. My hands, resting on the polished oak table in front of me, clenched into white-knuckled fists. My own lawyer, the formidable Ms. Diaz, placed a calming hand on my arm. She was a rock, an anchor of steady calm in this hurricane of manufactured lies. He crafted a cruel and self-serving narrative. Davies continued, pointing a dramatic, accusatory finger at me, that my client, in a moment of profound distress, abandoned her children. The truth, Your Honor, is that Mr. Kevin here callously and calculatingly prevented her from having any contact for 12 long, agonizing years. A wave of disapproving murmurs rippled through the gallery. I could feel the dozens of eyes on me, the weight of their judgment. I risked a glance back at my kids, sitting in the front row. Leo, my oldest, now a man of 20, had his jaw set so tight it looked like it was carved from granite. Sophie's eyes were filled with a fiery defiance that mirrored my own. Noah and Mia, my youngest, just looked terrified, their small forms huddled together. Ms. Diaz stood slowly, her movements deliberate and confident. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and sharp, cutting through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. The narrative here is indeed a powerful one, but it is not the fiction Mr. Davies is attempting to sell to this court. She picked up a simple, worn manila envelope from our table. It wasn't thick, it wasn't sealed with wax, but it held the undeniable weight of 12 years of truth. She didn't open it. She simply walked it over to the court clerk, who then passed it up to the judge's bench. Judge Thompson, a woman with a reputation for missing nothing, picked up the envelope. She slid out a single item, a glossy 4x6 photograph, its bright, jarring colors a stark contrast to the muted tones of the courtroom. She stared at it, her famously impassive expression flickering for just a fraction of a second. Her gaze lifted from the photo, cold and piercing, and landed squarely on me. The entire room seemed to hold its collective breath. Mr. Kevin, she said, her voice low but carrying with an unmistakable authority to every corner of the silent room. Do they know about this? She gave a subtle nod toward my children. The question landed like a punch to the gut. This was it. The precipice. The point of no return. I looked at their faces, the 4 faces I had loved, nurtured, and protected for more than a decade, and my throat tightened into a painful knot. I leaned forward toward the microphone, my own voice barely a whisper, but in the dead, suffocating silence, it sounded like a cannon shot. Not yet. But before I share the story that led to that moment, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. I love to see how far my story can reach. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. I'm Kevin, I'm 35 years old, and this is the story of how a single hour, a single lie, changed the rest of my life. 12 years ago, I wasn't a guardian, a defendant, or anything remotely resembling a father. I was 23 years old, a junior architect with a clean, crisp blueprint for a life that seemed bright, orderly, and clear. I had just been made lead on a small commercial project at my firm, a huge step that could lead to a significant promotion, and I was diligently saving every spare penny for a prestigious graduate program in Chicago. My world was composed of clean lines, Precise measurements, deadlines, and the quiet, humming ambition of a young man on the rise. Then came the storm. It wasn't just the literal one that was lashing against the large windows of my small, second-floor apartment that Tuesday afternoon, but the one that wore my sister's face. I remember the squeal of tires on the wet asphalt, a raw, ugly sound that cut through the rhythmic drumming of the rain. I glanced out the window to see Chloe's beat-up sedan jerk to a stop at the curb, half on, half off the pavement. The driver's side door flew open, and she practically tumbled out into the downpour, her normally perfect hair plastered to her face. She wasn't alone. She was pulling, dragging for small, struggling figures behind her. I threw my own door open just as she stumbled up the porch steps, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Chloe? What in God's name is going on? Are you okay?" She looked completely frantic, her eyes wide and unfocused, darting around as if she expected to be ambushed. She shoved the kids toward me into the relative dryness of my doorway. There was Leo, a serious, solemn 8-year-old clutching a soggy backpack as if it were a life raft. Sophie, 6, her knuckles bone-white as she gripped a worn, one-eyed teddy bear. Noah, a tornado of 4-year-old energy, already trying to tug at my pant leg. And little Mia, just 2, strapped into a stroller, her small face beet red from crying. "Just 1 hour, Kev," she said, her voice quick and brittle, almost lost in the howl of the wind. "Please, I just need 1 hour. I swear. I'll be right back." She dropped a heavy diaper bag at my feet. Its straps landed in a growing puddle with a sad splash, like tangled vines. Before I could form a single coherent question, about allergies, about what was so terribly wrong, about where in the world she was going, she turned and fled. "Chloe, wait," I called out, my voice swallowed by the storm. "What about their dinner? Does Mia need a specific formula?" "Anything," but she was already scrambling back into her car. The engine roared to life, a desperate, angry sound that drowned out my words. And then she was gone, fishtailing down the street, leaving a plume of gray exhaust hanging in the damp, heavy air. I stood there on the porch, completely stunned, with 4 pairs of confused, frightened eyes looking up at me. My architect's mind, a mind used to order, logic, and meticulous planning, felt like it was short-circuiting. This wasn't a problem you could solve with a T-square and a pencil. This was chaos. I herded them inside. My apartment, my quiet, orderly sanctuary, instantly became a whirlwind of wet jackets, muddy shoes, and pitiful whimpering. My brain, lacking any other framework, shifted into the only mode that made sense: triage. I dried hair with bath towels, warmed milk on the stove, and dug frantically through the diaper bag for snacks. The contents were a cruel joke. A few stale granola bars, a half-empty juice box, and a single solitary spare diaper for Mia. That was it. No change of clothes, no medicine, no comfort items, nothing. An hour bled into 2. I tried calling her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice tight with forced calm. "Chloe, it's been over 2 hours. Call me. The kids are asking for you." I sent a text. No reply. By midnight, the storm outside had settled into a steady, relentless drizzle. The storm inside my apartment had finally exhausted itself. All 4 children were asleep, a tangle of small limbs and restless dreams, crowded together under a single blanket on my pull-out couch. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak the glass, the reflection of a man I barely recognized staring back at me. A man who was suddenly, terrifyingly responsible. I pulled out the diaper bag one more time, searching for a clue, for anything. Tucked deep in a side pocket, my fingers found a crumpled piece of notebook paper. Her hurried, spiky scrawl was barely legible under the dim light. "I'll be back soon. Thanks." No name, no explanation. Just that one, chillingly vague word. Soon. As the long night deepened and the city outside grew silent, that word started to feel less like a promise and more like a lie. The first week was a blur of improvisation and mounting dread. Soon never came. Chloe's phone remained defiantly off. My increasingly frantic texts went unanswered, sitting there with that single, damning checkmark. Delivered, but not read. The 1-hour favor had morphed into an indefinite prison sentence, and my old life, the one with the clear blueprint, was the primary casualty. The acceptance letter for the graduate program in Chicago was pinned to my corkboard, a crisp, white symbol of my future. I had stared at it every morning for a month with a thrill of anticipation. On the 8th day of Chloe's deafening absence, I took it down, folded it with numb fingers, and placed it in a drawer. Chicago was a dream from another lifetime. My new reality was a 4-year-old who had night terrors about monsters and a 6-year-old who wouldn't let go of my hand, even when I was trying to cook. My most urgent call, the one I thought would bring the cavalry, was to my parents. I expected panic, righteous anger, a plan of action. What I received was a chilling, clarifying dose of the family dynamic I had spent my entire life trying to escape. "Oh, Kevin?" My mother, Eleanor, sighed into the phone, her voice laced with that familiar, weary annoyance she reserved just for me. "You know how Chloe is. She's always been so dramatic. She probably just needed to blow off some steam." "Blow off steam? Mom, it's been a week." She left 4 children on my doorstep with nothing but a handful of granola bars. "This isn't dramatic. This is abandonment. Don't you dare use that word," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. "Your sister is going through a very hard time. Her boyfriend left her. She lost her waitress job. She has a lot on her plate." There it was, the endless, flowing river of excuses for Chloe, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. "Your father and I wired her some money last week. She'll be fine." "What about the kids?" I pressed, my voice rising with disbelief. "What am I supposed to do? Mia is out of formula. Leo missed 2 days of school. This is not a sustainable situation." I heard my father, Richard, muttering in the background. His voice was muffled, but his words were as clear as a bell. "Tell him to handle it. He's the older brother. That's his job." My mother came back on the line, her tone now brisk and dismissive. "Your father's right. Just handle it for now, honey. We're swamped with the planning for the hospital's charity gala this month. Just be a good brother. She'll be back for them eventually." The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, the silence ringing louder than her words ever could. I wasn't just their brother. I was their janitor, a convenient, reliable place to dump an inconvenient problem. No one was coming to help. No one was riding to the rescue. It was just me. That phone call was a brutal turning point. The faint, flickering hope I had that this was all a terrible mistake was extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. These kids had no one else. That resolve was tested just a few nights later. I was woken by a small, whimpering sound. It was Mia. I went to her, placing a hand on her forehead. She was burning up. A wave of pure, undiluted panic washed over me. I was a 23-year-old architect, not a doctor. I fumbled for the thermometer. It read 104. I bundled her up, woke the other 3 sleepy, confused kids, and rushed to the emergency room. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, antiseptic smells, and the terrifyingly calm voices of the nurses. They hooked Mia up to and for, her tiny body looking impossibly fragile in the oversized bed. The doctor, a kind woman named Evelyn Reed, told me it was a severe febrile seizure. "We need to keep her overnight for observation," Dr. Reed said, looking at me with gentle but probing eyes. "We need to contact her mother. She's unreachable," I stammered, shame and anger warring inside me. "And the father? Not in the picture." Her gaze softened. "Okay, then you're the emergency contact." She handed me a clipboard. As I filled out the paperwork, writing my name, my number, my signature on every line, I made one last, desperate call to my mother. "Mom, Mia's in the hospital," I whispered, trying not to wake the other kids sleeping in the waiting room chairs. "She had a seizure. The doctor says she's stable, but—" "Oh, for heaven's sake." Eleanor's voice was sharp with sleep and annoyance. "It's probably just a little fever. You're overreacting, Kevin." Chloe's children are always so dramatic. Just give her some Tylenol and put her to bed. Don't call me at 3 in the morning with this nonsense again. She hung up. I sat there, the phone buzzing with the disconnected tone, and something inside me broke. It wasn't just that they wouldn't help. It was that they didn't care. They didn't care if their own grandchild was sick, suffering, or scared. Their allegiance was absolute, and it was not with these children. The next morning, as I walked into the Asheville Elementary School office with Leo, my exhaustion was a physical weight. The clerk, a stern-looking woman, pushed a stack of forms toward me. I need proof of guardianship. Birth certificates. A notarized letter. My heart sank. I don't have a letter. Her mother left in a hurry. The clerk's eyes softened slightly when she saw the hospital bracelet still on my wrist. Look, she said, lowering her voice. We have a form for temporary guardianship of record. It's for situations like this. It will at least get him in school while you sort things out. I took the form. My hand was shaking as I filled it out. Under the line for relationship to child, I paused, then wrote, Uncle. But it felt like a lie. After the night I just had, after the absolute abdication of every other adult in their lives, I was already something more. I pressed my name into the paper like a promise. The heavy thud of the date stamp on that form echoed in the quiet office. Something inside me knew, even then, that this piece of paper was more than just bureaucracy. It was the first piece of evidence. The first brick in a wall I didn't even know I was building. Years began to stack up, each one a testament to Chloe's profound and unshakable silence. The seasons changed, the kids grew, and my small apartment transformed from a minimalist bachelor pad into a chaotic, loud, loving home. My architectural models were replaced by sprawling Lego castles. My pristine blueprints were covered in a fine layer of glitter and crayon drawings. My life was no longer my own, and in a strange, exhausting way, I was grateful. But beneath the surface of our new, cobbled-together normal, I became a quiet collector of truths. It was less a conscious decision and more a gut instinct, a primal need to document the injustice of it all. I never threw away that first crumpled note. I kept every single letter that Sophie and I sent to the last known address we had for Chloe, each one coming back stamped with the cold, impersonal words, "Return to sender." They formed a sad, thick stack in a shoebox in the back of my closet, a monument to a one-sided conversation. Our kindly next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a retired librarian with a mind like a steel trap, stopped me by the fence one afternoon while I was trying to untangle a kite from a rose bush. "You know, Kevin," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, her eyes twinkling, "I never told you this, because it wasn't my place, but the night before your sister left, I saw something odd. I stopped pulling at the kite string." "Odd how?" A very fancy car pulled up, a black Mercedes. A man in a sharp suit got out and handed her a thick manila envelope. Looked like cash. She got in his car and they drove off. She came back an hour later in her own junk heap, went inside for maybe 10 minutes, then, well, you know the rest. An envelope of cash. A man in a suit. My stomach twisted into a knot. This wasn't a desperate mother cracking under the pressure of poverty and single parenthood. This was a planned exit. A transaction. She hadn't run from a problem. She'd been paid to start a new life. A few weeks later, while doing a deep clean of the closet to make room for Noah's outgrown clothes, I found it. The thing that confirmed Mrs. Gable's story. At the very bottom of the old, forgotten diaper bag, tucked into a torn seam, was a folded, faded receipt. It was from a sleazy motel just off the I-40, dated the night before she disappeared. But it wasn't the date that made my blood run cold. It was the name signed for the room in a bold, masculine script. It wasn't Chloe's. It was a man's name. She hadn't just left. She had left with someone. She had a partner in her escape. I slipped the receipt and a written, signed statement from Mrs. Gable into the growing collection, which I now kept in a sturdy, fireproof envelope. That envelope felt heavier than paper. It held the tangible weight of deceit. The children, meanwhile, were facing their own battles. Leo, in middle school, started getting into fights. One day, I got a call from the principal. Leo had punched a boy who had been taunting him, saying his mom was a deadbeat who didn't want him. When I got Leo home, he was sullen, his eye already starting to swell. "You can't solve problems with your fists, son," I said gently, holding an ice pack to his face. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that was far older than his years. "Then how do you solve them?" He wasn't wrong, was he? "She doesn't want us." The question hung in the air, a poisoned dart. What could I say? I couldn't lie to him, but the truth was a sledgehammer. "I don't know why she left, Leo," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I know it has nothing to do with you. It's her loss. And I want you. I will always want you. You and me, we're a team. We protect our own." That became our mantra. We protect our own. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during the painful, bureaucratic process of sorting through my grandparents' estate after they both passed away within a year of each other. Their old house was now mine, a place filled with warm memories of a kinder, simpler family life, but also a place filled with legal documents. Buried deep in their will, a document my parents had glossed over and dismissed, was a clause I'd never noticed before. It was dry, legalistic language, but it hit me like a shot of adrenaline. In the event of a dispute regarding the primary family residence, priority of residence will be granted to the family member providing direct, continuous care to children of the bloodline. My grandparents, in their quiet, unassuming wisdom, had seen the fractures in our family long before they split wide open. They knew who was reliable. They knew who showed up. They had left me a shield, a legal fortress. I made a certified copy of that page and slid it into the envelope with the motel receipt, the returned letters, and Mrs. Gable's statement. I sealed it shut. The kids were teenagers now. Mia called me Dad, not by accident, but as a simple, undeniable fact. Leo was looking at colleges, dreaming of becoming an architect like me. They didn't remember a life before me. I had stopped waiting for Chloe. I had stopped being angry. I had just become their father. I thought the war was over, that we had survived the worst of it. I didn't realize it hadn't even begun. The knock on the door came on a crisp Saturday in October. 12 years, almost to the month, since Chloe had vanished into the rain. The house was humming with the beautiful, ordinary noise of a life we had painstakingly built from the ashes of her abandonment. Leo was in the living room, hunched over his laptop, his face a mask of concentration as he filled out college applications. Sophie was strumming her guitar on the porch swing, a soft, hopeful melody drifting through the open window. Noah and Mia were engaged in a loud, laughing water balloon fight in the backyard, their shrieks echoing through the neighborhood. I opened the door, a smile on my face, and the noise, the music, the laughter. It all died in my throat. There she was, Chloe. She was glossy. That's the only word I could find for it. Her hair was a perfect cascade of blonde highlights, her makeup as flawless as a magazine cover. She wore a tailored white blazer and expensive-looking jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. The 12 years that had carved deep lines of worry and exhaustion into my face had seemingly polished her to a high, unnatural shine. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, radiating an aura of smug, parental satisfaction, were my mother and father, Eleanor and Richard. And flanking them, like a sleek, predatory shark, stood a man in a dark suit holding a leather briefcase. This wasn't a prodigal sister returning home with a repentant heart. This was an invading army. "Kevin?" my mother said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Look who's finally here. Chloe's back to make our family whole again." Chloe's eyes slid past me, her gaze cool and appraising. She didn't look at the photos of her children on the wall, the ones that chronicled their lives from gap-toothed grins to awkward teenage growth spurts. She looked at the hardwood floors, the crown molding, the antique lamp that had belonged to our grandmother. It was the look of someone assessing property, not a mother seeing her home. "Hello, Kevin," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any warmth or emotion. The man in the suit stepped forward, extending a hand that I had no intention of shaking. "Mr. Kevin." I am David Davies, Miss Chloe's legal counsel. We are here to begin the formal process of family reunification. The phrase sounded so clinical, so obscene, it made me want to be sick. From behind me, Leo appeared in the doorway, his young face hardening into a mask of cold fury. Sophie's guitar went silent with a discordant thud. What do you want, Chloe? Leo's voice was low, laced with a raw contempt that made me both intensely proud and utterly heartbroken. Chloe finally looked at him, a flicker of annoyance crossing her perfect face. I want my children back, of course. And I want my life back. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, taking center stage. We will be filing a petition for full and immediate custody of all 4 minors, he announced to the quiet, suburban street. Furthermore, we will be petitioning for the sale of this property, as it is part of the family inheritance, to be divided equitably. My client has been denied her rightful share of the family estate for far too long. The world tilted on its axis. The sale of our home, the inheritance, it all clicked into place with a sickening thud. This was never about the kids. It was about the house, the money. The kids were just the leverage, the key to unlock the assets she felt entitled to. Eleanor stepped forward, placing a proprietary hand on Chloe's arm, a gesture of solidarity that was like a knife in my gut. Kevin, this foolishness has gone on long enough. You've had your fun playing house, but it's time for this to end. Chloe is their mother. We've enabled your little fantasy for too long. Enabled me? The word was a slap in the face. I had enabled them. I had solved their problem. I had raised their abandoned children. I had cleaned up their mess, and this was my reward. Betrayal. Sophie stood up from the porch swing, her eyes blazing with a fire I knew all too well. Playing house? He raised us. Where were you? Where were any of you when Mia had a fever so high she had a seizure? Where were you on Christmas morning? Or when Leo made the honor roll? That's quite enough, young lady, my father said, finally speaking. His voice was stern and cold, the one he used to close business deals. Show your mother some respect. She's not my mother. Mia's small voice piped up from behind my leg. She was clinging to me, her face pale and frightened. He's my dad. The word hung in the air, an undeniable, unshakable truth. Chloe flinched as if she'd been physically struck. For the first time, a crack appeared in her polished facade. It wasn't a crack of remorse or sadness. It was a crack of pure, unadulterated rage. You see what he's done? She hissed, turning to her lawyer, her voice a venomous whisper. He's poisoned them against me. This is parental alienation. This is kidnapping. That's what this is. The accusation, so vile, so twisted, so fundamentally untrue, sucked all the air from my lungs. I pulled my children close, my arms forming a protective shield around them. I looked at the 3 adults who shared my blood, who were supposed to be my family, and I saw only strangers. Strangers who had come to burn my world to the ground. The legal papers arrived 2 days later, delivered by a grim-faced courier who refused to make eye contact. It was all there in cold, sterile black and white, a formal declaration of war. A 50-page suit for full custody, a separate petition to force the sale of the house, and a motion for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was an unstable and manipulative influence who posed a danger to the children's emotional well-being. Each word, each legal phrase was a carefully crafted dagger designed to inflict maximum damage. The days that followed were a descent into a special kind of hell, a Kafkaesque nightmare where truth was irrelevant. My family, the people who were supposed to be my first line of defense, became the chief architects of my destruction. The phone started ringing, and it didn't stop. It was aunts, uncles, cousins, people I'd shared Thanksgiving dinners with, all calling with the same rehearsed, pitying script. Kevin, I just got off the phone with your mother. My Aunt Susan began, her voice dripping with concern. I had no idea Chloe was suffering so much all these years. Eleanor said you wouldn't even let her talk to the kids on the phone, that you'd hang up on her. Your father told me you've been living off their money for years while pretending to be some kind of saint. My Uncle Mark accused, not even bothering to hide the disdain in his voice. It was a systematic, brutal smear campaign. They were painting me as a villain, a greedy, manipulative monster who had stolen my fragile sister's children and home. The truth didn't matter. They had their narrative, and Chloe, the beautiful, tragic victim, was at the center of it, with my parents playing the role of her noble saviors. The most painful call came from my D. Carol, my mother's younger sister. She had always been the cool aunt, the one who slipped me $20 on my birthday and seemed to understand my desire to escape our family's suffocating dynamics. Her voice was syrupy with fake sympathy. "Oh, Kevin, this is just a nightmare," she cooed. "I told Eleanor she's being far too harsh. How are you holding up? And the poor children, what are they saying about all this? Are they confused?" Like an absolute fool, blinded by a desperate need for an ally, I confided in her. I told her how scared the kids were, how Leo refused to even say Chloe's name, how Mia was having nightmares again for the first time in years. 2 hours later, I got a furious, screaming call from my mother. "How dare you let Leo disrespect his mother like that? Carol told me everything. You're encouraging this defiance. You are a sick, twisted man, Kevin." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had walked right into their trap. She wasn't an ally. She was a spy, a listening post in their coordinated attack. The smear campaign wasn't just confined to family. It bled out into my professional life. I did freelance architectural design on the side to make ends meet, to build a college fund for the kids. I had a promising project designing a deck for a wealthy client in town. The day after a particularly vicious email from my mother made the rounds among our extended family, the client called me. "Kevin," he said, his voice awkward and strained. "Look, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to go in a different direction with the project. With this messy custody battle and the things we're hearing, it's just not a good look. We need someone without all this drama." I had lost the job. They weren't just attacking my role as a father. They were attacking my ability to provide, to keep a roof over our heads. They were trying to break me from every possible angle. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the dark kitchen, the stack of legal documents on the table in front of me, a monument to their betrayal. I felt utterly and completely alone, drowning in a sea of lies. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I thought about giving up. Maybe it would be easier to just let them win. Let them take the house, let them have it all if it would just stop the pain, stop the endless attacks. Then I looked up and saw the height chart we had kept on the doorframe since Mia was old enough to stand. It was a chaotic ladder of pencil marks, each one dated in my messy handwriting. Leo, 10th grade. Sophie, 8th grade. Noah, 6th grade. Each mark was a piece of our shared history, a testament to 12 years of laughter, tears, fevers, triumphs, and unconditional love. They weren't just fighting for a house. They were trying to erase us. They were trying to declare that these 12 years, my entire adult life, my sacrifice, meant nothing. A switch flipped inside me. The exhaustion was still there, a bone-deep weariness, but now it was fused with a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. They had fundamentally underestimated me. They saw me as the quiet, reliable son, the dutiful older brother, the one who would always clean up their messes without complaint. They didn't realize that a man who has nothing left to lose but his children will fight like a cornered animal. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the best, most ruthless family law attorney I could find. A woman named Ms. Diaz, whose online reviews described her as a shark in a skirt. "Ms. Diaz," I said when her sharp, professional voice answered. "My name is Kevin. My family is trying to take my children and my home. They think I'm going to roll over and die. They are about to find out how wrong they are." The fight was on, and I was going to use every single stone, every single piece of paper, every single painful memory I had collected over the last 12 years. My first meeting with Ms. Diaz was in her stark, modern office overlooking the city. She was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through the polite facade to the raw nerves underneath. I laid out the whole, sordid story, from the rainy afternoon Chloe arrived to the declaration of war on my doorstep. When I finished, my voice hoarse, I pushed the worn manila envelope across her expansive glass desk. "This is everything," I said. Every returned letter, every doctor's bill with my name on it, every school form, the will from my grandparents, and this, I pointed to the faded motel receipt. She opened the envelope and examined the contents with the methodical precision of a surgeon. She read Mrs. Gable's signed statement. She scrutinized the copy of the will, a small, grim smile touching her lips. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw a flicker of something predatory in her eyes when she unfolded the motel receipt. "This is good," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of false sympathy. "This establishes a clear pattern of behavior and a premeditated intent to abandon. Their case, Mr. Kevin, is built on emotion, hearsay, and outright lies. Ours will be built on a foundation of cold, hard, irrefutable facts." For the first time in weeks, a sliver of hope, sharp and bright, cut through the suffocating fog of my despair. We spent the next few weeks in the eye of the storm, preparing for the battle ahead. Ms. Diaz's team was a well-oiled machine. They deposed everyone. They spoke to Dr. Evelyn Reed, our pediatrician for the last decade, who provided 12 years of medical records. She confirmed under oath that she had never once met or spoken to Chloe. My name, and only my name, was on every medical file as the primary caregiver and emergency contact. They spoke to the principal at the high school, who provided attendance records for every single parent-teacher conference. I had never missed one. I called my old colleague and friend, Maria Sanchez. She had been my rock during those first few chaotic years, a constant source of support when I thought I was going to break. "Of course I'll testify, Kevin," she said without a moment's hesitation, her voice warm and fierce. "I'll tell them how I found you asleep in a chair, still in your work clothes, with a baby monitor in your lap, because you'd been up all night with a sick kid and had a deadline the next day. Let them try to call that playing house." But the real turning point, the phone call that changed the entire trajectory of the game, came on a rainy Tuesday night. It was late. I was going over bank statements with Ms. Diaz on the phone, painstakingly trying to prove how every dollar of my modest salary went into this house and these kids, building a defense against their ludicrous claim that I was somehow after the inheritance. An unknown number flashed on my screen. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another relative calling to harass me. "Hello," I answered, my voice tight with annoyance. There was a pause on the other end. "Is this Kevin?" The man's voice was hesitant, laced with an unfamiliar accent. "Who is this?" "My name is Alex Chen. You don't know me. But I used to date your sister, Chloe. A long, long time ago." The name clicked in my memory with the force of a gunshot. He was the name on the motel receipt. "I heard through the grapevine what she's doing to you," he continued, his voice filled with a weary, palpable bitterness. "Let me guess. She's playing the victim? Crying about how you stole her perfect life from her." "That's the general idea," I said, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. "Yeah, that's her signature move. She did the same thing to me. Left me with a mountain of credit card debt and told all our mutual friends I was an abusive monster. Look, I don't want to get involved in your family drama, but I can't stand by and watch her do this to you and those kids. I remember how she talked about them. She was so proud of getting away." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward, my knuckles white on the desk. "I have something you need to see," he said. "She sent it to me about a month after she left you with them. She was drunk, bragging about her new life. I kept it all these years. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew that one day, someone would need definitive proof of who she really is." My hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "What is it?" "It's a video," he said, his voice low and serious. "And I think it's going to win your case." We met the next day in a quiet, anonymous coffee shop halfway between our cities. Alex Chun was a tired-looking man in his late 30s, the ghost of Chloe's recklessness still haunting his eyes. He didn't say much. He just handed me a small, black USB drive. "She ruined a good portion of my life," he said, his gaze distant. "Don't let her ruin yours." He stood up, paid for both our coffees, and left without another word. That night, after the kids were in bed, after the house was finally quiet, I plugged the USB into my laptop. My hands trembled as I clicked on the single video file. And then her face filled the screen. Chloe, 12 years younger, her face flushed with alcohol, her eyes glittering with a manic, cruel energy, laughing in a crowded, noisy bar. The sound was tinny and distorted, but her words were crystal clear. They were words that would become the epicenter of the earthquake that was about to shatter our world. The first day of the custody hearing was a masterclass in theatrical deception. Mr. Davies put Chloe on the stand, and she delivered a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She wept as she described her crippling, desperate postpartum depression, her voice cracking as she told the court she had only intended to be gone for a few hours to clear her head and had returned to find the locks changed. "But he wouldn't let me back in," she sobbed, pointing a trembling, accusing finger at me. "Every time I tried to call, he would hang up or tell me I was an unfit mother. He told me the children were better off without me. He stole my babies from me, Your Honor. He stole my life." My parents followed, a well-rehearsed chorus of corroboration. My mother spoke of Chloe's fragile mental state, producing old journals from her teenage years as proof of her lifelong struggles. My father, in his expensive suit, spoke with solemn gravity about how I had taken advantage of the family's inheritance, living in the house rent-free for years while my poor sister struggled. It was a beautiful, compelling, and utterly repulsive fiction. Then Davies called his surprise witness, a woman named Jessica Price, whose vaguely familiar face I placed as one of Chloe's old party friends. She swore under oath that she had been with Chloe on multiple occasions when Chloe had driven to my house, only to be turned away at the door by me. "He stood on the porch," she said, looking directly at the judge with wide, sincere eyes, "and told her she was a disgrace and wasn't welcome. It was a blatant, outrageous lie, a complete fabrication. But it was her word against mine." I watched Judge Thompson's face, saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. The narrative was powerful. A struggling single mother, shunned by her cold-hearted brother. We were losing. Ms. Diaz's cross-examination was brilliant, poking holes in their timelines and highlighting their lack of any physical evidence. But the emotional damage was done. We left the courthouse that day under a heavy, suffocating cloud of despair. That night was the longest of my life. I sat in the dark, holding the small USB drive in my hand. It felt both impossibly light and unbearably heavy. It was the key to my salvation, but it was also the key to my children's heartbreak. Could I do it? Could I detonate this bomb in the middle of their lives, destroying whatever fragile, idealized image of their mother they still clung to? Leo found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., a silent shadow in the dark. "We're losing, aren't we?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. I couldn't lie to him. "Not anymore. It's not looking good." He looked at my hand, at the small plastic drive resting in my palm. He didn't ask what it was. He just knew. "Whatever you have to do, Dad," he said, his voice hard with a maturity no 20-year-old should ever possess. "Do it. We can handle it. We're tired of the lies." The next morning, the atmosphere in the courtroom was even more tense. Davies rested his case, a smug, confident smile playing on his lips. Ms. Diaz stood. "The defense calls Alex Chun to the stand." A murmur went through the room. Chloe's head snapped up, her face draining of all color. Alex walked to the stand, looking weary but resolute. He swore his oath, his eyes never once straying toward Chloe. "Mr. Chun," Ms. Diaz began. "How do you know the petitioner, Ms. Chloe? We dated, briefly, 12 years ago. And did you remain in contact after she left Asheville?" "She contacted me once," he said, his voice steady and clear. "About a month after she left. She sent me a video message." Davies shot to his feet. "Objection. Relevance? This is from over a decade ago. It is the most relevant piece of evidence in this entire case, Your Honor," Ms. Diaz countered, her voice ringing with conviction. "It speaks directly to the petitioner's state of mind and her true intentions regarding her children at the time of the alleged abandonment." "I'll allow it," Judge Thompson said, her eyes narrowed, fixed on Chloe. "Play the video." The courtroom technician took the USB drive from Ms. Diaz. A large screen was lowered from the ceiling. For a long, tense moment, it was blank, and the only sound in the room was the low hum of the projector. Then an image flickered to life. It was a noisy, crowded bar, the kind of place with sticky floors and cheap beer. The camera was shaky, clearly from an old cell phone. And there she was, Chloe, 12 years younger, her face flushed with alcohol, a wild, careless grin on her face. She was laughing, shouting over the loud music to the person holding the camera. "My kids?" she slurred, the sound tinny but her words horrifically clear. A cruel, dismissive smirk played on her lips. "Oh God, no. I am so done with all that. Diapers and whining and no sleep? Not for me. I'm not built for that." She took a long sip of her drink, gesturing expansively with the bottle. "My boring-ass brother can handle them. He's good at that responsible stuff. Me? I just need my inheritance money to live my life. My real life. The one that's just starting, baby." She raised her glass to the camera, a triumphant, chilling smile on her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated selfishness. "To freedom," she yelled, "and to never changing a diaper again." The video ended. The screen went black, but her words, her laughter, hung in the air, echoing in the dead, absolute, suffocating silence. It was a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. Every eye in the room was fixed on Chloe. Her face was a mask of chalky white horror. My mother had both hands clamped over her mouth, her body trembling uncontrollably. My father looked like he had been turned to stone, his face a grotesque sculpture of disbelief. The spell was broken by a single, choked sob. Came from Sophie. Tears were streaming down her face, silent and devastating. Leo wrapped a protective arm around her, his own face a grim, shattered canvas of pain and vindication. The camera, the evidence, the depositions, the lies, they all melted away. All that was left was the raw, brutal, undeniable truth and the 4 children who had just been forced to witness it. Judge Thompson's gaze fell on me. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, heavy with the weight of the moment that had just unfolded. "Mr. Kevin," she said, the formal title sounding strange and new. "Do they know about this?" I looked at my children, my beautiful, broken, resilient children, and the truth I had tried so hard to shield them from, the truth that had now been laid bare for all the world to see. My voice was thick with unshed tears. "Not yet." The silence that followed my answer was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the sound of a family shattering into a million irreparable pieces. It was the sound of 12 years of carefully constructed lies collapsing into a pile of ash and dust. Chloe didn't even try to deny it. She couldn't. She just sat there, shrunken in her chair, the glossy, confident veneer stripped away to reveal the ugly, selfish core underneath. Mr. Davies, for the first time in his long, loquacious career, was speechless. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, shuffling his papers on the table as if the answer, some magic rebuttal, might be hidden there. It wasn't. Judge Thompson's gavel came down, not with a sharp, percussory crack, but with a heavy, final, resonating thud that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. "This court," she began, her voice ringing with an authority that was absolute and chilling, "has heard 2 profoundly different stories over the past 2 days. One story was of a struggling young mother, tragically separated from her beloved children by a cruel and manipulative brother. The other story was of a young man who sacrificed his youth, his career ambitions, and his own future to raise 4 children that were abandoned on his doorstep like unwanted luggage." She paused, her eyes sweeping over Chloe and my parents with a look of undisguised contempt that made them physically recoil. "It is now abundantly, painfully, and sickeningly clear which one of those stories is the truth. The video evidence is unequivocal. This was not a moment of weakness, Miss Chloe. This was not a cry for help. This was a declaration of intentional, calculated, and celebratory abandonment." She turned her gaze to me, and for the first time, I saw not a judge, but a woman. I saw respect. I saw a profound human understanding. Mr. Kevin, what you have done is nothing short of heroic. You did not play house, as your mother so callously put it. You built a home. You built it with love, stability, and an unwavering dedication that is frankly awe-inspiring. This court recognizes you not as an uncle, not as a temporary guardian, but as the true and only parent these children have ever known. The words washed over me, a wave of validation so powerful it almost buckled my knees. 12 years of being the quiet, responsible one, the one who just handled it. And finally someone saw. Someone understood. Therefore, she declared, her voice rising with righteous power, this court finds as follows: full and permanent legal and physical custody of Leo, Sophie, Noah, and Mia is granted solely to Mr. Kevin. A restraining order is hereby issued against the petitioner, Miss Chloe, for a period of 10 years, with any potential for future contact to be mediated through this court only after extensive therapy and evaluation. Chloe let out a strangled, pathetic gasp. Furthermore, the judge continued, looking directly at my stunned parents, the petition to force the sale of the family residence on Maplewood Avenue is denied with extreme prejudice. The clause in the grandparents' will is crystal clear. That home belongs to the children and their caregiver. This court affirms that Mr. Kevin and the children are the sole legal residents. This matter is closed. The finality of the gavel striking the wood was like a starting gun. The courtroom erupted into a maelstrom of whispers and gasps. Reporters in the back were already on their phones, their voices hushed but urgent. Chloe crumpled completely, burying her face in her hands, her sobs now real, but they were the ugly, desperate sobs of a loser, not a victim. I felt a hand grip mine under the table. It was Leo. He squeezed so hard it hurt, but it was an anchor in the swirling sea of overwhelming emotion. Sophie was crying, but through her tears, she was smiling a watery, triumphant smile. We walked out of the courtroom, a united front of 5. As we pushed through the heavy doors into the echoing marble hallway, a frantic voice called my name. Kevin, wait, please. It was my mother. She and my father were hurrying toward us, their faces pale and desperate, the masks of righteous indignation now replaced with pure panic. Kevin, we need to talk, Eleanor pleaded, reaching for my arm. Her touch felt alien. We didn't know. We had no idea she would say those things. I pulled my arm away, not roughly, but with a finality that stopped her cold. I looked at her, at my father standing silently, uselessly behind her, and I felt a profound and surprising nothingness. Not anger, not hatred, just a vast, empty space where a son's love and obligation used to be. You did know, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. You might not have seen that specific video, but you knew. You knew she was a liar. You knew she was selfish. You knew she abandoned her children and never looked back. You knew for 12 years and you chose her anyway. You always chose her. We're your family, my father mumbled, the words sounding hollow and pathetic in the echoing hall. I looked at the 4 incredible, resilient people standing with me. Leo, strong and steady. Sophie, fierce and loyal. Noah and Mia, looking up at me with an absolute trust that humbled me to my core. No, I said, my voice clear and steady for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. This is my family, and they're waiting for me. We're going home. And with that, I turned my back on the 2 people who gave me life and walked toward the 4 people to whom I had given my life. We walked out into the bright, blinding sunshine, leaving the ghosts of our past behind in the cold, dark hallway of the courthouse. That night, the house was quiet. We ate pizza out of the box, sitting on the living room floor, not saying much. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the ugliness of the truth. Finally, Sophie looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. That woman in the video, was that really her dad? She asked, the word dad a firm, deliberate anchor. I took a deep breath. The time for shielding them was over. Yes, that was her. Why? Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Why didn't she want us? I pulled her into my lap. Oh, sweetie, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. That is a question about her, not about you. It's because she is broken in a way that has nothing to do with how wonderful and smart and funny and loving you are. Her not wanting you is the single greatest mistake of her life. And it was the single greatest gift of mine. Because it gave me you. We sat there for a long time, a tangle of limbs on the floor, a real family, finally free. The war was over. Now the healing could begin. This was the moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control of my life and my family's future. Thank you so much for staying with me to this point. You have no idea how much it means. Please, do me a favor and hit that like button, and comment with the number 1 down below, just so I know you were here with me on this journey. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences, my fight, mattered to someone. Your support is the single biggest reason I can continue to share the rest of my story. The 6 months that followed the trial were like stepping out of a dark, windowless room into the full, brilliant light of day. It was almost disorienting at first. The silence in our house was different. It wasn't the heavy, anxious silence of waiting for the next legal threat, the next manipulative phone call. It was a peaceful, contented silence, the kind that comes from knowing, deep in your bones, that you are safe. The cloud of uncertainty that had hung over our heads for so long had finally lifted, burned away by the harsh glare of the truth, and was replaced by the bright, clear sky of a future we could actually plan for without fear. The change in the kids was the most remarkable thing to witness. It was as if a massive, invisible weight had been lifted from their young shoulders. Sophie started playing her guitar again, but the melodies that now filled the house weren't the melancholic, questioning tunes of before. They were upbeat, hopeful chords, songs about new beginnings and open roads. Noah, who had grown quiet and withdrawn during the intense stress of the legal battle, rediscovered his boisterous, funny self. His laughter, loud and unrestrained, became the new soundtrack of our home. Mia, my sweet, sensitive Mia, seemed to smile more, a genuine, carefree smile that reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. She started sleeping through the night again, the nightmares finally banished. The biggest transformation, however, was in Leo. The angry, defensive armor he had worn for months, a shield against the world and his own pain, began to fall away, piece by piece. One afternoon, he came into the kitchen where I was sketching out some ideas for a small home extension. A project I could finally afford to think about now that the threat of losing the house and my savings was gone. He was holding an open, official-looking letter. "I got in," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of disbelief and pride. "The paid internship, at the big architectural firm downtown. The one I thought I had no chance in hell at getting." I dropped my pencil and wrapped him in a fierce hug, my heart swelling with a pride that was so intense it was almost painful. "They would be absolute fools not to take you, son. You're the most talented young designer I know." He pulled back, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I put your name down on the application," he said quietly, his gaze steady on mine. "Under the question, 'Who is your greatest inspiration?' I wrote about you. I wrote about how you showed me that the best, most enduring structures aren't built with steel and glass, but with sacrifice, consistency, and unconditional love." We just stood there for a long moment, two men who had been forged into a father and son not by biology, but by the shared fires of adversity. It was a perfect, crystalline moment, a quiet testament to everything we had fought for and won. Our lives were moving forward. We were not just surviving, we were healing. We were building. Our old family, however, was in a state of rapid, irreversible decay. Word trickled back to us through the town grapevine, which was buzzing with the salacious details of our case. My parents had become social pariahs. Their attempts to spin the story after the trial, claiming I had hired an actor to fake the video, had backfired spectacularly, making them look not only malicious but also foolish. Their powerful friends from the country club and the various charity galas now avoided them, their calls going unanswered. They had built their entire lives on a fragile foundation of image and reputation, and now that foundation had turned to sand beneath their feet. Chloe, we heard, had left town in the middle of the night. She moved to Colorado, but her reputation, amplified by the internet, followed her. The story, in its raw, dramatic detail, was the kind of thing that spreads like wildfire online. She couldn't outrun the truth of her own words. She had lost her children, her claim to the inheritance, her family's financial support, and any shred of dignity she had left. One crisp autumn evening, as I was sorting through the mail, bills, junk mail, a postcard from Maria on vacation, I saw it. A flimsy envelope with a postmark from Denver, Colorado. The handwriting, loopy and dramatic, was instantly, sickeningly recognizable. My first instinct was to throw it in the fireplace, unopened. Burn it. Let the poison it contained turn to ash before it could infect the peace of our home. But curiosity, a morbid, final kind of curiosity, got the better of me. I had to know. I had to see the final, pathetic chapter of this story. I opened it. The letter was not an apology. It was not a plea for forgiveness. It was not an expression of remorse. It was 3 pages of rambling, self-pitying nonsense about how she had been wronged, how the world was against her. She claimed the video was a deepfake, a cruel trick engineered by a jealous Alex Chun. She painted herself as a misunderstood artist, a free spirit who had been crushed by a conventional, judgmental world. Then came the final paragraph, the part that truly took my breath away with its sheer, unmitigated audacity. I know you won in court, Kevin, but you can't deny my blood right as their mother and our parents' daughter. I am in a bit of a financial bind right now, as starting over is so terribly expensive, and my creativity is being stifled by financial stress. As my brother, and as the person living in our family home, it's only fair and right that you help me out. I was thinking a loan of $20,000 would be a good start to show that there are no hard feelings, and that you're willing to help your family heal. I read it twice, then a third time just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. A loan. No hard feelings. The sheer, narcissistic, galactic-level delusion of it was almost comical. After everything she had done, after the pain she had inflicted, after trying to strip me of my home and my children, her only thought was still about herself, about money, about what she was owed. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel anything at all. She was just a stranger, a pathetic, selfish stranger who would never, ever learn, never, ever change. I walked over to the fireplace, where a low, pleasant fire was crackling, warding off the evening chill. I looked at the letter one last time, at the looping, self-absorbed script that had caused so much pain. Then I dropped it into the flames. I watched as the edges curled, turned brown and then black. I watched as her toxic words, her endless excuses, her bottomless greed, turned into nothing more than smoke and harmless ash. And as the last corner of the paper was consumed by the fire, I felt the last, lingering chain to my toxic past break and turn to dust. I was finally completely free. Tonight, the air is cool and smells like fresh rain, almost exactly like it did all those years ago. But this time, there's no storm brewing on the horizon. There's just the gentle, rhythmic sound of the sprinklers on the lawn and the warm, inviting glow of the string lights I've hung up in the backyard. From my comfortable chair on the deck, I can see inside through the large glass doors of the kitchen. Leo is home for the weekend from his internship, and he's patiently teaching Noah how to properly sear a steak, creating a delicious-smelling smoke that wafts outside. Sophie is at the counter, arranging a colorful salad, her phone propped up against a bowl, playing a new, beautiful song she's written. Mia is setting the table, her movements no longer those of a clumsy child, but of a graceful and confident young woman. They're laughing about something Noah said, their voices mingling into a perfect, effortless symphony of belonging. This sound, this scene, this is the sound of my life's greatest project. This is my masterpiece. For so long, for so many years, I thought my family had been taken from me. I mourned the loss of a sister, a mother, a father. In the quiet hours of the night, I would sometimes feel the phantom limb of a life I was supposed to have, the one where I wasn't a single dad at 23, the one where I was building skyscrapers in Chicago instead of elaborate forts out of couch cushions. But sitting here now, watching them, I realized the profound truth of my life. I didn't lose a family. I was given the rare, difficult, and beautiful chance to build one from scratch. I learned that family isn't about shared blood in your veins or a shared name on a piece of paper. It's about shared moments in your life. It's about who shows up when the storm hits. It's about who stays to help you clean up the mess. It's about the deliberate, conscious choice to love someone, day in and day out, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. My parents and Chloe were bound by blood, but they were strangers to the meaning of the word family. Me and these four incredible humans were bound by something so much stronger. We are bound by patched knees and whispered bedtime stories, by parent-teacher conferences and late-night driving lessons, by shared grief and triumphant joy. We are a family forged in fire, and the bonds we share are unbreakable. The blueprint of my life changed irrevocably 12 years ago. The future I had so meticulously designed for myself was erased in a single rainy afternoon. But the structure I built in its place, it's stronger, more beautiful, and filled with more love than I ever could have possibly imagined. I am not the man I thought I would be. I am something more. I am a father, and that is a title I have earned, a title I will cherish for the rest of my days. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reached you in some meaningful way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between the family you were born into and the family you built? I'd be honored to read your experiences. Please, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your presence here makes all the difference.